Hello, greetings and salutations. Welcome back to the BFC podcast. I hope you guys are having a great evening. We have a lot to get here today, but before we do, hit the like button. And if you haven't already, join the BFC community because I'm just getting started. So let's check into the chat and see who we have. I wonder if George's with us. I know. Oh, here we got the unboxing bastard. How you doing? How you doing, sir? Good to have you. The Anchor Bar sells chicken wings. That's pretty funny. Lori, how you doing? Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about chicken wings later after the interview because something really funny happened. I got to say, 2 days ago, and I saw the article. And I'm like, oh man, I was just talking about that on this podcast this week. So, Lori, good to have you. Unboxing, great to have you. Where's Jordan? Is Jordan in the house yet? I don't know, but guys, make sure you light up the comment section. And when we get to that time, make sure you ask questions. That's what this is all about: is due diligence and having an info sharing session. And so Sam Aker is in the house. Alec Weinberg, welcome. Need me some shrimp, DD. Well, that's why we're here, sir. So welcome everybody to BFC Live. Man, this has been great. This is going to be our Wednesday thing. So before we get started, wait, who else do we have? Well, Alec's blowing it up. I bought shrimp from India. We're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk a lot about sourcing and all kinds of great stuff. So all right, let's get into the first thing I want to start with today. And I want to get into a little bit of news, and I want to start with Eyeless. But let's just go back and remind ourselves that they had a very strong first quarter. And I know a lot of you are thinking, well, that's a lot because of QIND, but QIND is a subsidiary, one of four that is going to be launched to a big board. And so there's great things happening here, 557% revenue increase, a 44% increase in net profit, and 630% increase in balance sheet over its previous year first quarter results. That is phenomenal growth. Financial highlights from the first quarter of 2023 report include revenue of $19.8 million, net profit of almost $1 million, and a balance sheet of $250 million. All right, and let's just get to this quote real quick. We have made progress in vital areas of the business and are pleased with the overall results, as well as the prospects we have in place for the rest of 2023. Most of our businesses are affected by cyclical trends. There it is with that word. Can't say it. And we have solid order books in both our industrial and emergency response subsidiaries. Therefore, we do expect substantial quarter-on-quarter growth throughout the remainder of this year. At that same time, we are working hard on several key growth areas in our emergency response subsidiary, which we believe will have visible effect from this current quarter and increase as the year progresses. Eyeless Managing Director JP Backwell, and they did put out a tweet today. The OTCQB uplist application has been submitted. All right, and we don't know how long it's going to take. We don't know what they're going to ask for, if they're going to have to resubmit it, but the application has been submitted. I think this is great, and let's talk about why it's a good thing. It's a good thing because it distances themselves from the pink sheets for the time being. They've spent a lot of time there, so they're trying to move up and out. There were a couple questions that were brought to me, like, why is this so important? It's not that big of a deal. I received some DMs, but it is a big deal. Now let's look at the rules. And you could go right on Investopedia.com and really read through all this. The link is in the description for Investopedia.com. So take advantage of the due diligence, guys. Do your reading, and it can only make you a stronger investor. That's the truth. But if you look right here, here are the rules of the OTCQB. To be eligible, companies must be current in their reporting, undergo annual verification and certification, and meet a 1-cent bid test. We all know that. Not be in bankruptcy, and have at least 50 beneficial shareholders, each owning at least 100 shares. They have 34,987 to be exact. If you actually go, that's the number. I just checked it. So we're squared away there. The fee for doing this uplist is $5,000 for that application fee, and then it is $14,000 a year. So that is an indicator to me that they are definitely trying to show the investor that they're absolutely serious, because they're spending the money on going to this next tier of the OTC. And in a year's time, once they launch, they're going to hopefully have ERT and QIND up on a big board. New York Stock Exchange American. I don't know where they're going to put ERT. We're not sure what's going to happen with that one yet, but they're going to try and do that by the end of the year, because they have a big acquisition in the works. So we're going to find out what happens. There's a lot to be excited about. Yes, the share price right now is not favorable. There's a lot of stocks out there. There's been a huge retracement. The economy has a lot to do with it. But yeah, we're taking a beating with the Eyeless share price, but I'm in this one long. I've been in this one for 2 years, and I'm going to keep pounding the table on this one. So let's go to the next stock I wanted to talk about, and that is 3DX Industries. Now, mark your calendars because we are having a 3DX roundtable next Wednesday. It's going to be big. I'm going to have a bunch of people on from the company. I'm going to have other investors on. I'm really excited. Can you tell? It's going to be great. And because their shareholder meeting is coming up a week from Friday. I think it's the June 9th. So, and I'm hoping to be streaming that live through this channel. So even if you're not invested in 3DX Industries, come down, take a look, and ask questions. That's how you guys find good investments, is by asking the questions. Maybe you hear something that you really, really like and say, oh, I want to invest. Maybe you hear something, I'm not interested. That's what this is all about. 3DX Industries Incorporated demonstrates commitment to shareholder value through strategic share cancellation. So here it is. Roger Jansen has made a strategic decision to cancel 5 million of his personal shares, effectively reducing the outstanding share count and reaffirming the company's dedication to maintaining a favorable share structure. As a manufacturer at the forefront of additive and subtractive manufacturing technologies, 3DX Industries understands the importance of a solid capital structure and seeks to ensure its shareholders' interests are paramount. By voluntarily canceling a substantial number of his personal shares, CEO Roger Jansen aims to demonstrate his unwavering confidence in the company's future growth potential and his commitment to preserving and maximizing shareholder value. And so here's a quote from Roger Jansen. We recognize the significance of maintaining a tight share structure, and the cancellation of 5 million shares underscores our dedication to our esteemed shareholders. We want our shareholders to know that we are taking proactive steps to optimize their investment and position the company for sustainable success. We are close to securing a smaller round of financing from existing shareholders and want to make sure our outstanding shares are not increased. Myself and a group of others have invested in 3DX, and so it's pretty exciting to be doing that, and I'm looking forward to seeing their growth. I'm looking forward to having them on live next Wednesday in a roundtable. So make sure you come with questions, guys, and it's just going to be fun. So that's all I got with ILIS and Triple DX. So we have a very special guest with us today. I've been pretty excited about this one, as you can tell by my background. So I want to get right to it. Transamerican Aquaculture. All right, let's bring him in. Adam Thomas, CEO of TAA. Adam, welcome to Buffalo Fireside Chats. How you doing?
Good, Eric. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Now you're a Buffalo native, correct? Like you were.
I am. Yep. I'm born in Buffalo. Family's from Buffalo and the surrounding area. So yeah, I've spent a lot of time up in the Buffalo area, and we get back to Bills games as often as we can. So yeah, still tied to Buffalo.
That is awesome. Do you have a favorite wing joint?
So I don't actually. You just give me anything that's deep fried with buffalo sauce on it, I'm gonna be a pretty happy camper. So, but no, it was funny because my dad was actually talking. He wants to come up to a Bills game this year, and he wants to hit Ted's, Schwabel's, and Duff's downtown. So, looks like we'll have a packed agenda when we come up for a game this later this year.
That's awesome. Maybe we could connect and grab some wings together. And you know what? Believe it or not, it's funny because deep fried shrimp, bread them up, fry them, and shake them in buffalo wing sauce. It's a guilty pleasure. It is. So
I will bring some with me then. Be the proper time of the year. So,
all right. Well, let's get right into it. I just want to acknowledge people in the chat. Nick Coriano is here. Nick, welcome to the program. So listen, before we dive in, all right, no pun intended. I had to tell us a little bit of the backstory of your journey and how you arrived at this venture into the shrimp market.
Yeah. So, I mean, I never thought in my wildest dreams, starting my career in banking, that I'd ever wind up becoming a shrimp farmer. But it's, an ironic turn of events. So I started my career. I went to college in Northwest Ohio, and then I moved down to Columbus, Ohio, right after graduation, and started to go work for JP Morgan. So I worked for JP Morgan in a variety of kind of entry-level positions when I first got out of college, doing home lending, audit, kind of just getting familiar with kind of the whole business process. Eventually, I decided to go to grad school. And so post-grad school, my first position within the bank was to run an offshore operations in the Philippines. So a lot of the work that the bank does, client-facing stuff obviously is in front of the clients. A lot of the back office support stuff's done in international locations. So I was tasked with leading a group of about 400 people in the Philippines. So spent a year traveling back and forth between Columbus and the Philippines. And then the mortgage crisis happened. And so we had to basically, I was still in home lending at that point in time. So we had to create a quality department to really go through and look at every single mortgage document that had ever been signed, make sure that the bank didn't have risk and exposure and things like that. So pretty much over the course of a couple months, we went from not having a department to having a 350 people strong department that I was leading up. And then, we went through that for about a year and a half. And then I had the opportunity to go to work for a consulting firm. So my background after grad school, I majored and I had an MBA, but I had a focus in finance as well. So I was always interested in kind of deal work, mergers and acquisitions. And I had the opportunity to go to work for a consulting firm that was focusing on more mergers and acquisitions, but in the mortgage space. So consolidating law firms, consolidating mortgage servicers, things like that. That position brought me down to Dallas, brought me to Texas, and was in that role for about 3 years. And as that was starting to wind down a little bit, that's when I met my wife. So here's the introduction to shrimp farming. My wife is Ecuadorian. She was born in Peru, but raised in Ecuador. And my father-in-law and my father-in-law's brother, my wife's uncle, are two of them pioneers of shrimp farming in Ecuador. And around the 2017 time, for those familiar with Ecuador, the business climate, political climate, kind of just overall general safety and concern. There's a lot of things going on in that country right now. So the family was looking to get investment money out of Ecuador and into a field and industry that they knew about. So my brother-in-law and my wife's cousin, who were the other two founding members along with myself, were at a conference in San Antonio, and they heard about this opportunity to look at a couple shrimp farms in the Rio Grande Valley, down around Rio Hondo, Harlingen, Brownsville area in Texas. And so I got involved because of my background in banking, my background in finance. And so they're like, hey, I know you don't know anything about shrimp farming. Why don't you come along and we'll be able to evaluate the deal better. So the culmination of kind of that research and visiting a few farms, we wound up purchasing the largest scale farm in the United States, the largest scale shrimp farm in the United States. There's only a few shrimp farms in the United States. There's one very big one in Texas, but in terms of land wise, our farm is the biggest. And to give kind of some context around just how big, it's 2.5 times the size of Central Park. So it's not a small tract of land. It's not something where you see like a lot of these. I'm sure you've seen like your local newspapers, like people buying pools from Walmart, in a storage shed, and throwing some aeration and growing shrimp. It's not like that. It's a very big tract of land. There's a lot of opportunity for us to develop that further and to really expand the operation. So that happened in mid 2017. And since that point in time, we've been really focusing on building the genetics, doing small trials, doing small harvest runs. I think one of the things you mentioned earlier, we were talking kind of backstage, was like the families. And we'll get into that a little bit more later on. But like we have been able, by having our own farm, we quickly realized that we needed to be able to control our own genetics. The genetic quality of animals throughout the United States was not all that great. It's getting better. But it wasn't all that great at the time. So we knew we needed to be able to control that part of the life cycle. And so we built our own genetics facilities on site. We have that readily available, and that helps us kind of, make sure that we're getting the quality animals and the quality genetics we need. So, yeah, I mean, that's being born in Buffalo, not knowing what the heck I wanted to do in college, all of a sudden went to work for a bank, and here we are shrimp farming now.
And I got to say, and that must have been really going back to the mortgage crisis, because that's remarkable. I didn't know that. That must have been a completely overwhelming experience. Like, holy crap, overwhelming.
I mean, it was pretty interesting. Like, at that point I was, relatively fresh out of grad school, had my first real big like operations assignment, but then having to build something from like the ground up where the department did not exist. In a multi-trillion-dollar bank, you did not have this department. I think a lot of banks didn't have that department. So it was something that a lot of people were doing. But, we were able to be very successful very quickly. And you learn a lot when you get thrown in the trenches and you're working, 18-hour days to make sure that, the bank is not at risk and the customers are getting serviced.
Yeah, I got to say, Harold says, bankers make great farmers. So I've heard.
Yeah.
And, Nick does have a question. Nick Coriano, do you guys own the acres or is the land leased?
We own it. We own the farm.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about the management team and what each of their roles are and any special talents that they bring to the team and bring to the table?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I guess you could say my wife's uncle, my uncle, everybody in Latin families, everybody's an uncle, everybody's an aunt, everybody's a cousin. So I call him my uncle. So Fernando Granda, he leads the genetics portion of the farm, of the company. So Fernando's special, I guess you could say, like claim to fame was he was one of the pioneers with artificial environment broodstock cultivation. So historically, you'd get the broodstock from offshore. You'd bring the broodstock, the pregnant females, inland. You'd take the eggs, and then you put them into the ponds, and that's how you start shrimp farming. Well, Fernando was one of the pioneers in Ecuador in mating the males and the females in an artificial environment, which we would call a genetics facility or a maturation facility. And he had great success with that, and that's kind of been the standard going forward now in shrimp farming, where you don't really have to go to the ocean to pick up the females anymore. It's really, you have these females in your facility, you mate them with the males, and now you're able to produce your own eggs, your own larvae, and things like that. So, that's Fernando's claim to fame. He's been doing this for 40 plus years. He's a phenomenal geneticist, a phenomenal man to work with. We have a very good, strong working relationship as well as a familial relationship. But the guy really does know his stuff. It's one of those, I don't know who said, like, my dad would always say, like, oh, I've forgotten more about the Buffalo Bills than you'll ever know type thing. Well, Fernando knows more about shrimp farming, has forgotten more about shrimp farming than I'll ever know. And so just having somebody with his experience and his expertise it's invaluable. It's extremely hard to find, especially here in the United States.
And that is Fernando Granda.
Yep, there's the man.
Right there.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure you screenshot that. Or, hey, guys, you know what you do? Go and go look at the link I gave you, because guess what? All the bios are there. But continue on with any other team members that you want to sort of acknowledge. But yeah, but guys, I'm being serious. Put all the stuff's in the description. So do the reading, do the DD, and go ahead, Adam.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, myself and a gentleman by the name of Luis Arturo Granda, we're two of the founding members, my brother-in-law being the third, but my brother-in-law stepped back from his kind of day-to-day involvement in the farm. So Luis has been basically as a second generation shrimp farmer. He's Fernando's son. So he actually studied here in the U.S. He went to Texas A&M Galveston, got his degree in mariculture there, and then went to graduate school in Ecuador and has been running shrimp farms. He's run some of the largest shrimp farms in Ecuador. He owns multiple hatchery maturation businesses in Ecuador. And so he is part of the kind of like I'll call it like our strategy team and everything that goes on here in the States. His experience and his ability to problem solve too, I think is what, kind of gets overlooked sometimes, but like being able to think on the fly and being able to make adjustments, especially when you're in a new environment, like we were a couple of years ago with the shrimp farm, being able to tell like, hey, there's not something right here. There's something going on here. Let's make this change. Like doing that trial and error has really given us the kind of the superior genetics that we talk about and that we tout right now. So his experience and speciality, especially in the earlier stages of shrimp farming, in the hatchery maturation and sort of the kind of, we'll call it the larviculture stages. So, and then you have myself. Obviously, I'm the chairman and CEO of GRPS. Transamerican Aquaculture is a wholly owned subsidiary of GRPS, but my background comes from the banking finance side. So, when I was working with law firms and I was in the back office on the operations side, I always say, let's let the lawyers lawyer. Let them go do what they're good at. We'll take care of everything else. I do a lot of that now with Fernando and Luis. Let the shrimp guys go do what the shrimp guys need to do. I'll handle everything else on the backside. And that's a very good relationship that we've had and we've been able to develop over the last few years.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like you have a solid team. And do you feel like, especially almost, it's a family business at this point. And so do you think that camaraderie really is going to help execute this?
Absolutely. And I think too, there's no qualms about transparency or calling people out, which you would not typically think. Like you would think that there's, worried about stepping on toes or you're worried about what Thanksgiving dinner is going to be like. There's none of that. We call it like we see it. We're extraordinary. Like we're, as Ray Dalio says, radically transparent about everything that's going on because there's no other way to do it. If there's an issue, we need to diagnose, figure out what's going on, how we're going to solve it, and then put an action plan together. These guys are phenomenal at that. And it really makes, makes things a lot easier on everybody.
That's awesome. Do you see do you think the team's going to grow in the next 12 months, give or take?
Absolutely. We've always operated as kind of like a family company, but since going public and being a public company now, we actually have a board of directors. Bringing on those board is kind of like the first step to establish kind of a more robust operating committee, seeing where like kind of the strengths and weaknesses are related to the pubco, related to sales, marketing, finance, all that stuff. And I can confidently say that we're probably going to be looking at adding a couple C-level positions. Whether we have an extraordinary gentleman on our board by the name of Jeff Sadaka, who's been in the sales and marketing game for shrimp for 50 years now. So, I mean, like that may be a position we can kind of hold off on due to his relationships and his ability to essentially walk into any door he wants to. That really is a benefit to the company, especially with the story that we're telling and the shrimp that we're going to produce. But, there's a lot of stuff that goes on governance wise. I mean, that was probably the biggest slap in, upside the head for me when we took this public endeavor, was just the amount of compliance, the amount of governance. And that's only going to get more and more. It's only going to stack up more as we go forward with, the uplist, with becoming fully reporting, and then starting to work on those things. So probably be looking to bring on like a senior level financial person that can help not only with, like roll up the governance stuff underneath, make sure all the financial reporting, make sure all that stuff is right. Controller, bookkeeper, we outsource those right now. I'd like to bring that in-house. And then, we'll see kind of where we go Fernando kind of acts as a de facto COO right now. But I would like to formally get somebody in, because while we're focusing on shrimp farming and producing shrimp exclusively right now, we have other avenues that we can pursue and that we are pursuing that will need attention from more folks. Broodstock being one of them. Broodstock and the genetics is a massive opportunity for the company that we've been talking about, and we're making some headway on a lot of things there. But just being able to kind of manage and put everything together, like managing 3 different, kind of P&Ls essentially. Like you want to make sure that those individual businesses are having their own thing, so you can kind of, if you can monitor it, you can manage it type thing. So yeah, I imagine we'll definitely grow from the management team perspective, and then from we'll call it like skilled labor. We're always looking for folks there. It's very hard to find folks with shrimp farming experience in the Valley that have all the, we'll call it, rights to work in the United States, I'll say. So we do utilize an H-2A visa program, which allows us to bring foreign skilled workers in. So we'll definitely take advantage of that. But ideally, we'd like folks that can be at the farm full time all year round. Our plan is to, keep everything going year round with whether it's genetics, grow out, or with some special projects that we're working on the side as well.
Excellent answer. Sammy Aker has a question. Just because I took a gen ed on this in college, can you talk about your sustainability efforts in shrimp farming? From what I understand, it isn't always environmentally friendly.
Oh, so Sam gets gold star for the awesome question. So yes, shrimp farming gets a horrible rap. Especially when you look at like shrimp farming practices in Southeast Asia, or like if you just were to put that in your browser right now and search it, it's not going to be pretty. The conditions are less than sanitary. It's basically just how much shrimp can we dump into a pond? How quickly can we get it to a size it needs to be? How quickly can we get it out? Oh, there's something wrong with it. Let's throw a bunch of antibiotics in there. Let's throw a bunch of chemicals in there to make sure that these shrimp can come out of the ponds. So our farm, we operate, I guess you could call it on an organic standard, although there's no official organic standard in the U.S. We are a recirculating facility, so we don't discharge in the local environment. So you hear about a lot of mangrove destruction in the tropical climate countries that do shrimp farming. We don't discharge in the environment, so all of the water that we use throughout the farm gets recirculated through a 100-acre settling pond, which acts as a natural biofilter, and then we pump that water back into the farm. No antibiotics, 100% antibiotic free, 100% chem free, 100% hormone free. So essentially there is the shrimp, they go in the ponds, they get their feed, they get their additives in terms of like we supplement feed with like some soy and some other stuff, but nothing harmful, nothing chemical, to make sure that the shrimp are the healthiest they can possibly be. So from that standpoint, in terms of shrimp, overall shrimp health, those are the few things that we're doing. Some of the things that we're looking at from like an ESG standpoint is, right now, we run electric motors, we run diesel motors. We are running that off the grid. We would eventually like to get into solar or get into renewable energy. Based on the calculations we've done in terms of like the peak wattage we would need for certain things, that seems like a real possibility and an affordable possibility. Not to mention that where the farm sits is in like an economic development zone. So there's a lot of programs and a lot of grants available that we're looking at right now to really accelerate the, kind of the sustainable energy process that we're wanting to get into. So, phenomenal question. But yeah, we take all the measures to counteract everything against what you see and read in the news in terms of the shrimp.
That's amazing. And it makes me not, it makes me not want to eat this, Yeah. God only knows where this came from.
You look on the back and you'll see where it's from.
Yeah. You know what? I'm not even going to do that right now. All right.
Yeah. No,
Sam Maker, I hope you enjoyed that answer, Sam. So a couple months ago, you guys were featured. You're mentioned in an article on seafoodsource.com, which mentions AI in the shrimp farming industry. Will TAA be looking to incorporate this type of technology in shrimp farming?
Yeah. So, I mean, when you think about the way that shrimp farming has been done historically, it's extraordinarily manual labor intensive. Literally, guys driving up and down the levees on the ponds and throwing feed in, letting the shrimp come by, doing daily oxygen checks on the water. So, like 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning, doing oxygen readings, doing temperature readings. There are, it's labor intensive. One, it's not at a great schedule. But it's also costly. I mean, these guys are skilled laborers. They make a decent amount of money, especially on the H-2A programs. So we've been looking at hardcore auto feeders, which essentially an auto feeder is like it's a feed silo that sits in the middle of a pond. And on the bottom of it is like a sonar cone or some sort of like almost like a microphone device that it dispenses feed and it listens for these, like the signature of shrimp eating. So shrimp have mandibles. So when they eat, it makes a distinct sound. So you'll know when the shrimp are eating. So obviously, if you've got a guy who's literally just on the back of a truck throwing feed into a pond, you're not going to have the most scientific method in terms of your feed conversions and things like that. But utilizing these auto feeders is one way to bring feed conversion down, bring costs down, but also be more efficient with our feed and more efficient with the shrimp growth rates. Additionally, there are other devices where you can monitor the oxygen levels, pond conditions, heavy metals, things like that, salinity, temperature. Those are all fantastic to have. And it's very valuable to have that information, especially as you look at it over time. But if you can literally open up your phone, check an app, and see what all 80 of the ponds that are in use right now, what they're looking like on a daily basis, if you've got an issue somewhere and you need to address it. That is something that's, we have been in talks with a couple distributors about purchasing those as well. So just those two things alone right there are massive, opportunities for efficiency, reduction of costs in terms of labor, and also in terms of feed. And then you also have artificial aeration, which we are looking into. It's not necessarily something that we're going to dive head feet into first this year because of the model that we use is considered extensive, and we do enough water exchange and there's enough natural wind at the farm where we may not need to do that. But as we start to expand the farm and further intensify. So when I say intensify, I mean like right now we'll stock 15 to 20 per square meter shrimps, larvae per square meter. If we go up to 30 to 40, we'll probably want to introduce that artificial aeration. That also increases oxygen levels. You don't have to worry about those readings in the morning and things like that. And then that's just on the shrimp side. On the broodstock side, there are some programs out there where you can kind of, input your data. Obviously, the more data, the better. But then the programs start to spit out kind of like preferential mating pairings. So if you have, let's just say we'll use our facility as an example. We have 8 tanks that house broodstock. We know that this generation of broodstock right here has a specific disease resistance, but these broodstocks have exhibited exponential growth rates. We'll punch in all those characteristics, and then you can actually do almost like a machine learning model to see, hey, look, I need a very, very resistant animal that also has cold tolerance, and it grows at this specific level per week. We can punch that in, and you'll find out, okay, go to this tank, take that tank, mate those two together, and take a look at the results. So that is something that we're working on. We don't have that just yet, but those are like some of the programs that are available that we'll be getting into later this year.
Yeah, and you said, I think 10 to 15 per square meter, and eventually you wouldn't invest in that, once you get to 30 to 40 per square meter. And we had this conversation before. A lot of the shrimp that we're getting in the United States, there are 500, upwards of 500 shrimp per square meter, correct?
Yeah, so
that's insane. That is totally insane.
Well, and there's various models. So there's extensive, which is what we focus on. That is, the history of the family. That's where the expertise is right now. The family has developed expertise in kind of in more intense, like semi-intensive, we'll call it, or less extensive. But there's extensive, which is what we're focusing on right now, to make your RAS systems work. So these recirculating aquaculture systems that you have indoors, or technically we could be considered a recirculating facility because we don't discharge. But a lot of the indoor systems, you need to stock at a more higher density because just the simple cost to produce. Mm-hmm. And so as you look at kind of like South American models in certain instances, but then also in Southeast Asian models, like they're really starting to push the envelope. Okay, if I put 10 aerators in this essentially 1 acre pond, I'm going to have XYZ oxygen levels. So theoretically, I can have 3, 4, 500 animals per square meter. And if I get 50% of them out of the pond, so be it. Now, granted, they're going to be pretty stressed out. There's a huge competition for resources, which shrimp get stressed out pretty easily. You'd be surprised. Like they'll stop eating or they'll exit their bowels and they'll just decide not to eat. So they're very finicky when it comes to like having the right conditions for growth. And when you have those hugely intensive models, I mean, you're just not getting the type of quality of animal you get in an extensive or a semi-intensive model. And so that's where we're focusing. We have the infrastructure for that. That's not to say that eventually down the road, when the technologies develop and we start to develop characteristics with the shrimp where they can endure those more intense environments, and we'll not get into that. But right now, the focus is on the extensive model to provide cleanest, healthiest, most quality product we can provide. And you'll be able to literally taste the difference. So.
That's amazing. And I honestly can't wait to try your product. I really love companies that take pride in like, your Good Shops, your Butcher Boxes, all those companies that, those farm to door companies. And we're going to get into that in a second. But I really like what I'm hearing right now because I like fresh food, fresh, healthy food, especially healthy meat and seafood. Now, you guys are vertically aligned, so explain what that means for your company specifically. And you've touched on that a little bit, and talk about the importance of genetics ownership and how it is going to contribute to your growth of revenue and efficiency of the overall operation.
Yeah. So what we mean by like vertically integrated is we have our own like genetics, breeding, larviculture systems, and then our grow up ponds. So like typically you have like just you focus on one or the other. You focus on larvae, you focus on maturation, you focus on grow out. We are, as we realized, very quickly that the quality of the larvae was not necessarily where we needed it to be. With a couple of endeavors that we did in the 2018, 2019. So for us, it was very important to be able to control our genetics and to have that vertical integration, so we didn't have to rely on anybody else for post larvae. Now there are some good companies out there; they're getting better. But again, we feel that like being able to control that with the experience of the team, it gives us a huge competitive advantage because we can focus on not the word of somebody, but through actual like empirical data that says, I know that these shrimp are going to grow at this rate. They need this much feed. I need to keep them in the ponds at this much time. And if the water temperature fluctuates between this and this is what my output is going to be in terms of, their growth. So for us to have that capability really does give us the opportunity to be flexible in terms of customer needs, customer demand. So if one customer wants really big shrimp, we know that we need to put them in a different model and somewhere else, but we would also know that we'd want probably our faster growing lines there. If a customer is looking for smaller shrimp, but they're looking for something on the PL side that's more durable, then we'll focus on shrimp that have like the super disease resistance, the cold tolerance and stuff like that. So when we say vertically integrated, we mean that we control as much of the life cycle as possible. The other two things, I guess, that kind of bottom and cap that would be feed. So feed is kind of like your bottom, we'll call it like life cycle, or I can say like top of the house. Feed, the controlling the maturation and hatchery, the grow outs, and then processing facilities. Those are kind of like the four areas. We control the main two. In feed, there's a bunch of very high quality feed producers here in the US. So I don't necessarily know if we'll ever get into the feed game, but as the farm grows and as we start to work on, when we start to scale up in terms of the 7, 8, 10, 12 million pounds of shrimp per year, then it may start to make sense to put our own processing facility on site, because at that point we'll be spending literally $1 per pound, if not more, for processing. Building a processing plant, we know what the costs are. It's just making sure we can keep keep the operation busy. So, from that standpoint, that's something we'll look into. But right now, the kind of main two areas where we can be integrated, we are.
Wow. Very, very clear answer there. I did have a couple questions submitted to me. One regarding genetic drift. With the genetics being controlled, how many generations can be used before genetic drift can affect shrimp? Does the company send out new larvae for each batch? That was an interesting question that I thought.
Yeah. So we don't necessarily send out new larvae for each batch. We're in like the 5th and 6th generations of our families. When I say that, means that like this line started at the farm. We've introduced new post larvae, and any post larvae that we've purchased, the supplier has given us the consent to kind of grow those out for consumption purposes, and then anything we need after that. So I know that was a question that came up with the seafood show in when I was in North America earlier this year. But we will introduce new lines just to kind of refresh and to make sure that eventually you get into inbreeding. You can only have parents and pairs mating so much before you start to get into that. But I mean, like, I think, when we look at the overall brood stock that we keep at the farm and that we're planning to keep this year, probably won't be an issue for this year. We may look at talking to a couple suppliers just to see if there's an interest in maybe some sort of collaboration with the genetics we have and the genetics they have. But yeah, we will refresh the lines from time to time, but you usually have a good couple generations of those families before you run into any sort of issues. And you really want to keep building on that because certain strains and certain lines have different characteristics, different DNA and stuff like that you really want to, exploit in the grow out process. And so, we'll continue to use those animals for as long as it makes sense.
Yep. And that question was submitted by Jordan, and he actually sent another one, and you were actually just going on that for a second. Like, there's positive qualities based on how that mating is done. But then there are some negative ones. And his question was, due to genetics of the shrimp being identical, are there diseases or fungus that can impact production of the shrimp? And could you speak on the focus of your genetics program and how you're going to try and prevent that?
Yeah. So one of the main ways that we've done that is like there's diseases inherent in the water sources that we farm in. Now we've taken all the measures that we can to mitigate those with filtration through into each of the ponds and when they come into the farm and things like that. But I mean, these are microscopic, organisms and things like that. We have essentially what we've done is when we've had an issue with a disease in a certain pond or whatnot like that, you want to use those animals, especially the ones that survive, because those animals have some sort of resistance to or have some sort of genetic marker that makes them not susceptible to getting that disease. Those are the types of animals and those are the types of genetic traits that you want to pass on to the next family. So right now we're in a very good spot in terms of where we're at with our animals in terms of their disease resistance. They're they're pathogen free. So like you won't find anything necessarily in their DNA structures that if they're exposed to this, they may get it. They're extraordinarily healthy animals. Now, like I said, from time to time, you do have issues. I mean, you look at the history of shrimp farming across the world and absolutely disease outbreaks happen every year. Sometimes it decimates entire crops. Sometimes it's just kind of a drop in the bucket, but building, like you almost need to what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. I hate to use that cliche, but it's true. We've done the same thing with like the genetics for cold tolerance, for growth rates and stuff like that. So it's really about finding the alphas of the alphas when they're exposed to certain environmental elements and then constant testing. So we're basically at this point, we'll be sending batches for genetic testing, disease testing to the various labs in the United States, probably every week for like the next couple of months. But really doing rigorous pathogen testing, doing rigorous disease testing, making sure that there's certified anything that is found anywhere in a DNA marker or within a certain shrimp, we can isolate, quarantine, and figure out how to mitigate. So,
wow, great answer. Excellent. And you did talk about how there are some really good feed providers in the United States and high quality feed providers. And you did mention that, going on down the road, maybe or maybe not, you would get into that, but, but what is the cost specifically to feed the shrimp? And is the supply stable and does the cost fluctuate wildly?
I would say looking at the feed prices over the last few years, I mean, they've gone up a little bit. I wouldn't say it's anything crazy, maybe 6 to 7% over the last 3-4 years, which it's nothing. I mean, it's going to break the bank type thing. It's not like it's up 30-40%. And there's enough quality feeds that if someone, if one company is charging a little bit more, you can go with another company or vice versa. But, the feed supply, as long as you're giving them notice, they'll create the feed. If you're looking for a specific type of feed, like, for example, you might not want land-based animals in the feed product. I know some potential customers and clients are looking for that specific feed, like that specific moniker within the feed. There's always, good feed sources, reliable feed sources. The supply is pretty consistent as long as you're giving them enough heads up and a notice. They'll create special batches as well. So they're very flexible, very good partners to work with. And like I said, the pricing's been pretty solid. I wouldn't say it's up crazy. It's definitely not down. I'll tell you that much, but it's been pretty consistent over the last few years.
Yeah. And you used the word I was looking for was consistency. So that's amazing. Well, that's good. That's good to have that. You don't want things that are wildly out of control because then it's going to offset what your cost and it's going to affect the consumer pricing too. So we do have a question from Ernie. Are the pumps running or installed? Where will the shareholders meeting be hosted?
So to Ernie's first question, we just got the approval for the permitting for the construction of the additional transformer that we need in order to install the pumps. That was an issue that we were having. We do have 3 pumps running right now, so it's not any sort of kind of issue right now, but they said that they can install them in the next probably 3.5 weeks, which aligns perfectly with what we'll need. We really don't need the huge pumping capacity for about another 60 days or so. And then shareholders meeting, it will be at the farm down in Rio Hondo. When it is going to be, we're thinking probably late October-ish, because that'll coincide kind of with the end of the harvest season. It'll be a good time to get everybody down there.
All right, Ernie, thank you for those questions. Excellent. I gotta ask this question because, like I was telling you earlier, I'm a farm to door consumer. Do you see Trans American? Do you see you guys expanding to the farm to door sector, and what kind of revenue and profitability do you think you could bring in from this?
Excuse me. Yes. So we do plan to expand and explore this area. It's something that we've been talking about at length. We're talking to a couple different processing plants up and down the Gulf Coast that can provide this capability, because what we really want to do is, like, the way that the processing works now is we harvest the shrimp out of the ponds, we put them in, pack them on ice, we send them up to be processed. They get processed whatever method that we want, then they get frozen or they get sent fresh wherever they need to go. Having the ability to do like individual box sizes and things like that is definitely it's a value added process. But then again, the margin's there, so it's something where, let's just say we're getting $10 a pound for our shrimp wholesale. And I'm not using the accurate numbers here. I'm just making this example simple. It's a $10 per pound wholesale type thing, where if we decide to go direct to customer, we could do $17 or $18. That additional dollar that we'll spend on the processing cost justifies the cost of shipping, justifies the cost of the value add, justifies all that stuff, because the shrimp will need to be sent overnight, if not like super rapid 2-day. You can pack them, tight enough with gel packs and things like that to keep them cold for probably 48 hours, but it's kind of pushing it. And you want the shrimp to arrive, nice and cold, nice and ready to go. You don't want spoiled shrimp. To do any sort of fresh products, that's more of like a local thing. So we do sell some local to local restaurants and things like that. We are talking to a couple restaurant chains about maybe rather small mom and pop shops, but just about being able to provide our shrimp on a fresh basis. So that's, the local market for fresh, and then the direct to door for like the frozen product overnight. That's definitely something we're looking at, and something we'd love to build out, because right now, like historically how we've sold the shrimp has been to big box retailers, and they throw it in their display case because it looks nice. It lasts, a decent amount of time. Doing the individual, like to the, from farm to table type stuff, that would require us to do a little bit of branding, and putting together all sorts of the boxes, the branding and things like that, which we're definitely not opposed to. It's just, should that be the focus of how we want to go with our product? So yes, we're absolutely looking into it. We'll see if we can make it work from a perspective of getting the branding down, making sure that we can get it to the customers, the logistics are right, because we can pack it all in those boxes and get them ready for the customers. But if we can't get it there in a reasonable amount of time, then it kind of doesn't matter.
And I've had experiences, especially if you remember about a year and a half ago or so, there were a lot of shipping delays, and I'll never forget it, where I received some boxes of meat, and it wasn't necessarily the company. Those boxes of meat sat on these hot trucks, and I received meat that was warm to the touch.
Oh, yeah.
And these companies would send me another box of meat. So I would assume that there's some type of insurance that you would have to pay additionally to deal with all that. Because you know what? I mean, I know that, I could just imagine, because I've talked to people where it happened during that time frame, there must have been a crap ton of product wasted. And so that seems like it would be maybe an insurance issue for that. So.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. Like, we've had issues sending samples, so we've spent literally thousands of dollars to send samples to a potential customer overseas. And I mean, I'm not calling out FedEx or UPS. They both have hurt us when it counted type thing. So equal to them. But yeah, I mean, we spent $1,500 to send samples 2-day from the farm to Tokyo, and they got there 7 days late, and they sat on the tarmac in Narita in the middle of August for 4 days.
Not good.
No.
Not a
So
good
I mean,
sample.
but those are the types of things where it's like, we don't want to have those issues, but if we have those issues, we want to make sure that, there's obviously insurance or there's a refunding process or whatnot. So
Mm-hmm.
just, again, it's a logistical problem for us to work on and something that we're excited about. So we'll probably dive into it over the next couple of weeks here as we're getting, the shrimp and the ponds and stuff like that.
So it's safe to say that you guys are really going to target the U.S. distributors first
Absolutely.
before you go to right
Yeah.
to the consumer.
I
Yeah.
mean, distributors, I would say, depending, we're price sensitive just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that, bringing Jeff on is Jeff does have a lot of relationships with these, with direct buyers. I'll put it that way. So like direct at the retail chains, not necessarily having to go through a middleman or a broker. But some of the packing plants have phenomenal relationships as well, where they give you, great pricing. So for us, it'll be twofold. It'll be one, obviously we're price sensitive, but two, relationship dependent. So we're not planning to grow, 1 million pounds of shrimp this year and then kind of walk away. We're planning to grow 1 million pounds this year, a couple million pounds next year, more after that. Like somebody that's wanting to grow with us, somebody that's will be there to buy product when we have it. So we've started to have some of those relationship discussions and things like that, but we'll look to cultivate those over this year, knowing that next year and the year after that, we'll probably have enough supply to fill their entire needs.
Okay, good. Guys, if you have any questions, make sure you put them in the comments section. All right. And thank you, all of you, for joining today. And let's talk a little bit about share structure. By the way, thank you so much for these nice answers. And I gotta say, like, I learned a lot researching this week about shrimp farming, so this is all knowledge and I like learning. So let's talk about share structure. Right now, you guys are at a market cap of 3.9 million. Authorized share count of 3 billion, outstanding share count of 1.3 billion, with 306 million of those being restricted, with an 896 million float. So I'm going to ask you just to sort of clarify, concerns about dilution or that kind of thing. But I did want to bring up, from the article we talked about earlier, this is your part that you were mentioning in the article, that basically, right here, that you said basically the company is seeking an initial 2 million investment, and that will see this stupid thing keeps up popping up. I don't know why. That will see it through its first harvest on half of the firm's acreage, and that we're already talking about this. From there, the firm will need another USD 5 million to expand into the southern 650 acres, that other part that you were talking about. And that should get the farm to about 11 million to 12 million pounds of production annually. So my question is this, and I'm going to actually update it with this article in it so that way you guys could take a read. So let me just ask you, is there going to be private funding? Is there going to be a ton of dilution? And any dilution that will occur, do you think it's going to impact the stock in the long term by adding value and return value?
Absolutely. I mean, that's, I think we came out, we're in the first quarter filing that we did, we announced an investment that we had received. Any investment that we receive that we're bringing into the company is for the sole purpose of growing the company, driving production, becoming more efficient with production, expanding into the lands that we have and things like that. So shrimp farming now is an expensive process. And the way that the structure of our cycle works out, all of our expenses are incurred prior to our revenue event. So it's not like we get, we have like a month of buildup of ramp up of revenue. No, it's bone dry until we get the shrimp out of the ponds, but all the expenses are incurred between then. So there is obviously a cash need to get us to that first cycle. Now, it was interesting. I got a question from a shareholder earlier today about this exact thing. Like, is the initial funding that we're looking for and things like that to set the baseline for our growth and expansion? And it couldn't be more spot on. That's absolutely right. So addressing the specific question, will there be dilution and things like that? Like, we'll look at deals that make sense for the company that are going to add value in excess of any dilution that we would potentially see. Like, for us, it's really important to take this company to where we believe it can be and then go beyond that with multiple different avenues that we run into down into the future. The future of the farm is not just shrimp farming. Like, the future of the farm will be, but the future of the company, of GRPS, which I know this is one of the things we'll touch upon later, but the name change, Trans-American Aquaculture. Mm-hmm. The future of that company is a seafood company. And so right now we're focusing solely on the shrimp. It's what we know, but looking at acquisitions down the road and things like that, after we get, kind of the ship steadied on the shrimp portion,
Mm-hmm.
that'll be something we'll do. Now, do we think we can do that organically? Absolutely. If there's an opportunity to accelerate that expansion, that intensification, or any sort of acquisitions, and it makes sense to the company and to the shareholders, then we'll absolutely look at it. There's no reason not to. So I would just say from that perspective, we're going to look at deals that make sense for the company and for the shareholders and that are creating more value in excess of any sort of dilutionary event.
Yeah. And I got to say, and in doing these interviews and meeting people on this platform, it's really cool because I like to see people passionate about the business and you're really speaking to specifics. And obviously, you know what you're talking about. And between you and your family and the foundation that you're laying, I'm pretty excited. I'm very excited for you. And you did mention the name change. I do want to bring up that tweet from a couple weeks ago. And Transamerican Aquaculture nearing completion. I love this thing that keeps on popping up. It's like wild over here. Financial audit. So you're going to get that completed. It's near completion. Name and ticker change. Lavaculture, PL development, and in progress. Pond stocking. Broadstock quarantine, partnering with international aquaculture players to expand footprint and annual shareholder meeting at the farm. And you did talk about that earlier. So just to add to that, of course, and maybe you could follow up with this. Ex Celestial Demon asked earlier, he mentioned broodstock. What is that? So if you could just answer that question.
Broodstock are the mating shrimp. So these are the alpha males and alpha females that before we harvest the ponds, what we do is we'll do sampling of every pond. We'll look at kind of your biggest, best, consistent shrimp that have, grown, that have experienced adverse conditions or whatever. You'll look for the biggest, best shrimp, most durable, most hardy. We will use them as our brood stock for the next stocking cycle. So they're a mating shrimp. And, if you believe in, reincarnation, you want to die and come back as a brood stock shrimp. Like they literally have, we bring out all the bells and whistles. They eat, we feed them completely different diets than we do the grow out shrimp because we want to encourage healthy maturation. So like, for example, when it comes to female broodstock, a lot of the process, and PETA has been all over shrimp farmers for this, is in order to accelerate maturity in the females, you usually ablate one of their left eye. There's a hormone in the left eye that prevents them from essentially going through puberty. The way that we have grown the shrimp in, very low stress environment, the way that we treat them when they're selected for broodstock with squid diet, bloodworm diets, they have a temperature controlled, 85 degree, 100% humidity, mating suite, we'll call it. So like we're putting them up in the penthouse, we're giving them the fillets, we're letting them do their thing. We have been able to actually get natural maturation, which produces much stronger, healthier eggs. So we don't ablate. We don't have to ablate the eyes. We have natural maturation, and that in turn gives us more eggs that come out of the egg sac for the women. Typically, the females you get 150 to 200,000. We're seeing 300 to 350,000 per the female right now, and that's due to the way that we do it. So the broodstock, long and sweet, they're the mating shrimp. They're the genetically superior mating shrimp.
Excellent. So could you talk a little bit and just go back about when are we expecting the audit to be completed and the official ticker name change? Okay, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Go ahead. Sorry. Name change, we're expecting any day now. So we have one pending item. I believe a couple weeks ago we got our second round of questions. We responded to all those. There was one further item following up on a historical thing that we're taking care of. That, to me, my understanding from FINRA, that's the last hurdle. I'm not going to say it is the last hurdle, but from my understanding, that is the last hurdle right now. So I'm hoping this is done any day now. As soon as we provide that documentation, we should be good to go on that. Again, we'll announce that with bells and whistles as soon as that's done, because, a lot of questions, a lot of feedback that I've gotten from shareholders, but then also important for us too, as we move into, our specific branding of the shrimp and whatnot, is having our own identity. I know that there's, for good, bad, or worse, the historical company that was involved in certain things, there's some animosity and angst around the name. So we're really trying to get away from that and focus solely on the shrimp farming aspect and the genetics aspect of that. So hopefully we'll have the name change done relatively soon here. And the audit, we're hoping that's, done relatively soon as well. I'm meeting with the auditor at the farm this Sunday to kind of go over any last details, and we should be ready to go there.
Will that bring you to fully SEC reporting?
Well, yeah, we'll just have to. That should get us there, with the
Okay.
exception of just filing the 10Q,
Thank
with
you.
the Q2 filings, which, assuming the audit gets done, everything's
Yep.
good to go. That is our plan right now, is to try and be fully reporting with the quarter 2 filing.
All right, I have a couple more questions for you. By the way, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Cool.
What are projections and for the domestic and global shrimp market? Based on my research, it's slated to grow steadily into 2028. But that's what was projected in 2019. I was looking for projections, and I did find an article from 2019. Obviously, a lot happened in 2020 and 2021. But where do we stand now? Talk a little bit just about the specifics as to where you see TAA landing in the overall shrimp market, domestically and globally.
Yeah, so globally, it'll be more on a genetics play. It'll be more with broodstock. How can we start to impart the genetics that we have in some of these foreign countries to create better quality shrimp there as well? But I mean, the U.S. global market, I think right now, I think this year I just saw a statistic. It was like the U.S. market consumed 1.8 billion pounds of shrimp this year, which is an insane number. I mean, I think the year before COVID, it was around 1.7. Then during COVID, it went down. It was back up in 2021, and now the projection numbers for the rest of this year are projecting to be an all-time high. I think the annual compound annual growth rate is something like 7 or 8% over the next 5 years, which would get the U.S. market well into the 2 billion pounds. So, I mean, you're always going to have commodity product on the market in the United States. That's not going to get away. It's not like tomorrow we're going to start producing 2 billion pounds of shrimp. I'd love to get there, and we'd probably need a farm about the size of Texas to be able to do that. But where we think we can make our mark is when you look at like the Gulf Wild, though. So Gulf Wild, when the Forrest Gump, think Forrest Gump, Bubba Gump, that's Gulf Wild. The Atlantic coast, there's usually about 110 to 120 million pounds a year that come out of the ocean in the Gulf. So those are considered a premium in the market. So the pricing structure of those is kind of way up here. So let's call it $7 a pound for a very good size shrimp, whereas your commodity pricing may be down at $350, $325. Historically, we've fallen pretty much dead smack in the middle. And that is without, kind of doing any sort of branding, any sort of kind of value add. This has just been us pulling the shrimp out of the ponds, sending them to the processing plant. Processing plant has been buying all of our shrimp pretty much at the dock type thing. So for us, even if we were to produce 10, 12, 20 million pounds of shrimp a year, still less than 1% of what the U.S. is going to be consuming. So for us, it's a niche market, but it's a massive niche market. Like if there is such a thing, like when it comes to shrimp, there is. So for us, it's all about touting the quality, letting people get their hands on it, taste it, because the shrimp does have a unique taste to it because of the natural environment it's grown in. And then really just driving home all the sustainability characteristics, full traceability. Like if you wanted to right now, the shrimp that we're going to be putting in the ponds this week, when we harvest them, you can say, okay, this shrimp came out of pond B1. This was in nursery tank 1A. This was in hatchery tank, 2 or 12C. This was in the broodstock. These are the parents for the broodstock. Like we have that traceability that I think provides a lot of confidence, because I could literally trace you back through the entire growth period of that shrimp, its parents, show you the genetic profiles of those parents and the disease resistance and all that stuff. So for us, it's about taking it a step further, starting to educate the market on like what quality shrimp looks like. It can be done on a farmed basis, and that's what we're trying to bring to the marketplace. So, we're not necessarily concerned about the amount of shrimp. Like I'm very confident we could sell all the shrimp that we produce. I don't think that'll be an issue. But if it ever comes to a certain point where we're having issues selling our shrimp, that'll mean that we have so much production that we're starting to find. So we'll deal with that problem as we come to it. But
yeah, well, you said, I mean, even before that, you've talked to distributors that said that they would take all you got up to 2 million. You know what I mean? So that's unbelievable. So first, thank you very much for coming on. But I want to finish. What's your message? What would you like to share with current shareholders and potential future shareholders?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's just we are really excited to bring the shrimp to the marketplace. We like growing shrimp. We're going to exploit our genetics markets. We'll explore every opportunity to grow the company. But for us right now, it's about getting shrimp in the ponds, letting shrimp grow, getting shrimp out of the ponds, and building the company that way. So making sure that, the shareholders that are investing in the company that like what we're doing here, that want to be on board, we're building a solid base of production that we're going to continue to build on. refine the techniques, and then eventually diversify into other markets, work on uplisting the company. Like I said, we're not here to grow 1 million pounds a year, sit on our hands, and that's it. We are, I mean, I hate to say it, but like we're looking to dominate the market in the United States in terms of premium quality shrimp. And then if other opportunities become available for us to get involved in, whether it's other types of seafood, whether it's genetics plays, whether it's other companies in general, like we'll look at that from a strategic standpoint as well. So, you know, we have short, midterm, long-term goals. I think I outlined them on the first call that we had way back in September. Maybe I'll reiterate those because we're still very much driving towards all of them. Had a couple hiccups here and there. You know, I think I've explained that through the newsletter and on Twitter, but you know, we're still on the path. We're not diverging from it. Our goal is to build a sustainable company, one that provides clean, quality products, and then diversify our genetics into other opportunities as well. So, you know, we feel that not only from a shrimp perspective, but we can have an impact on the RAS sector as well, because the genetics that we have the opportunity to be very flexible and to do certain programs where we feel we can help eventually those companies bring down those costs. And when it makes sense for us to enter into that market, that's something we'll evaluate as well.
That's great. I did have one more question from Walker Lunsford that you've sold. I don't know if this is about 1,000 worth of shrimp this year. Are you guys still on target for that 4.4 million? If so, how?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, like our grow out cycle, like we really won't realize our revenue until the shrimp are ready to come out of the pond. So that's still, a couple months away type thing. Like we had planned kind of a July. Now we're looking at August, kind of September. We had to change some things up just based on some things that we had going on in terms of labor, skilled labor. So we finally got the right people. We trained them all up and we're rocking and rolling right now. So even with the experience that we have at the team, you still need folks to, help out. We are on track for that target. I would say we're trending towards it in terms of where we're planning, the levels we're planning to stock at. Assuming we hit our price targets and assuming we hit our mortality levels, we should be pretty close to target.
Excellent. Thanks for answering that last question. Adam Thomas, thank you so much for being on the BFC. I appreciate it. You're welcome back anytime. I'm looking forward to having an update with you in the next month or two. You're welcome anytime. And any of your board members are welcome, or I should say family members.
That's right.
Welcome anytime. Bring on anybody that you want from the company. And this is an open platform to you, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate the platform. I appreciate you reaching out. Thanks for the time. I think we've tried to be as transparent as possible. Twitter is not exactly my strong suit. I'm still trying to figure out just because, what relevant updates need to go out and stuff like that. So I appreciate you giving me the forum to at least to be able to speak to our shareholders. And so thank you very much for that. And yeah, I'll be back whenever you'll have me. So.
All right. Thank you very much and have a great night. That was Adam Thomas, guys. That was awesome. Very informative talk with him. And I'll tell you, I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot about this whole thing. The one thing, I don't know, I'm sort of in the mood for some shrimp right now, I got to say. I totally am. But I did want to talk real quick before we shut this down. It's sometimes I try to figure the words to use because it's like this very complicated process, especially in the shrimp farming industry. I'm like, how do I word this properly? So, it's just amazing what you learn. But I did want to talk about that funny thing I said. And by the way, but he was not feeling good. He's battling a sinus infection. He was not feeling good, but he was a trooper, man. He went for more than an hour answering all your questions, answering my questions. So kudos to Adam Thomas. I hope to have him on soon. And man, I hope they do farm to door because I will be first in line because I do love me some shrimp. But I wanted to talk about those buffalo wings real quick. And I wanted to share this with you because you know how I said that I love Bar-Bill. And if you're ever up in Buffalo, go to Bar-Bill's. Well, I had to laugh because this article came out 2 days ago, and it's sort of like the Buffalo mentality, just like, you have the Philly steak mentality in Philadelphia where you have the local expert. And it says right here, they're going to tell you where to get the best hoagie, and it's not the one that's most well known, even though I have been to Tony Luke's and I liked it. But it said, everyone wants to feel like they are in the know, a local expert of sorts. It's a fun and ego-driven thing to tell out-of-towners you know better. Hey, maybe you do. Maybe you don't, though. Regardless of psychology of it, it makes sense because everyone in the city and community with a known food can have the same take. Let's go to this place instead of the known one because this is where the real people from here go. So I saw that and I did laugh. And by the way, the guy who wrote this article, I was laughing because his favorite wing joint is Bar-Bill. So he was speaking my language, but he went on to say that basically, and I wanted you guys to know this too, like, I'm not taking anything away from Anchor Bar. I just, I don't like their wings as much as other places, but that's just me. I was laughing when I saw that. I'm like, I have to totally share that with my BFC crew. So I don't know. Listen, I hope you guys enjoyed that chat. I'm hoping to have him back on again. So remember, guys, stay true. Keep coming back to the BFC. If there's anybody you want me to try and get an interview with, let me know. Shoot me a DM at buffalofiresidechats@gmail.com. And remember, there's more that binds us than breaks us. You guys have an awesome evening. Peace out.